allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we do have a quorum, and the chair would like to recognize Andrew Beeklin, Montana School Board Association. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pleasure to be with you this evening, and greetings to the rest of the Board of Trustees. You've all received the screening matrix and the application materials that I sent out, is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. So the function of tonight's meeting is simply to look at those applicants to determine which individuals the board is inclined to offer interviews to, and then to talk about some details for those interviews. Before we get started, though, I always like to remind boards of trustees, in your deliberations this evening, you are subject to the Governmental Code of Fair Practices, which in Montana requires that you make your hiring decisions based on merit and qualifications. The statute in question then goes on to prohibit hiring decisions made for any other reason, and it lists protected classes that you're likely already familiar with: age, gender, political ideas. Marital status is a sleeper one in Montana that not a lot of people know about. But that's just a reminder in terms of your comments this evening regarding the applicants. As this is a public meeting, those individuals have a right of privacy in their job performance and in personal details of their lives. So in terms of comments made at screening, it's usually better to keep things positive. You don't have to engage in a detailed discussion of the pros and cons of each applicant. You guys will have ample opportunity to do that after you have interviewed the people that you're interested in. Generally speaking, during screening, it's best just to indicate top 3 or top 4 that you're interested in speaking with, and leave it at that. If there's no reason to dwell on the negative attributes of the individuals that you choose not to offer interviews to. To give you guys a sense of where we are in the process after we get done tonight, I'll start conducting reference checks on the finalists that you suggest. That means we go through the application materials, we contact all of the references that they list, and then we try to at least double that number in references that we select or that we identify, so you don't just get feedback from people who are pre-selected to say nice things about the candidates. You actually get to hear from trustees, from co-workers, from people who worked in their previous school districts. We need about at least 2 weeks for that period, so after that 2 weeks, you would meet to conduct interviews. We also have to decide whether you are going to permit virtual interviews. Of course, I'll be there in person to help you guys out, but you have to decide whether you want your finalists to be there in person, whether you'll offer the option of a virtual interview. You'll also have to address whether you are going to provide any reimbursement for travel expenses. And just briefly on that, if you decide that's something you're interested in, our recommendation is that you set a cap and require that those expenses be supported by receipt. But with that, I'd welcome any questions from the trustees, or if you want to hop right into discussing the applicants that you're interested in interviewing, go ahead with that as well.
Okay, well, based on the survey that we read over, we have 4 really strong candidates that we would like to propose to you. Do you want their names? Is that how this works?
Sure, yeah. Who were you guys thinking?
So, Alexander Ator, Brandy Carlazzoni, Stacy McIntyre, and Cheryl Peterson.
Can you read those for me again? I apologize.
No worries. Alexander Ator, Brandy Carlazzoni, Stacy McIntyre, and Cheryl Peterson.
And in terms of the details of the interviews, let's have a look here. 2 weeks down the road, we'd be looking at the week of the 10th. How is the board's availability that week?
Just 1 second, please.
I guess when you say availability, is that evenings, during the day? Like, what's the thoughts there?
It's whenever you guys want to meet. Let me pull up the week of the 10th on my calendar. I don't think I have much that week.
I'm assuming evenings would be best for everybody on the board. Is that?
Just put your chair around. This is Andrew. Montana School.
Bill's here. I'll make whatever work.
So Andrew, how long do these interviews normally take?
Typically, it's about an hour per interview. I go ahead and schedule them hour by hour. We used to give a 10 or 15-minute break between interviews, but generally speaking, if you have in the low teens for the number of interview questions, that's about an hour. You might have someone who is more long-winded or takes less time, but then you just have time to flex in between interviews. Another thing that we should discuss is whether you guys wish to schedule some type of social mixer for the candidates, or whether you might have some sort of facility interview. A very typical structure is for a facilities director or a principal, someone who knows the facility, to give the finalists a tour of the facility right after the interview. And that kind of creates a nice flow, because then when you've asked your final question, it gives that person a place to go and makes it less likely that they will sit in on the interview of one of their competitors, which is perfectly legal, of course, but generally frowned upon in terms of etiquette.
So 2 weeks seems pretty quick if we're going to ask people to travel here. Is that, so that's, I'm assuming virtual is going to be the easiest route, obviously.
You could offer virtual or in person. Some people believe that there is an inherent advantage to interviewing in person. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I've attended some virtual interviews for superintendent searches where the virtual individual ended up getting the offer. So it's not necessarily determinative. We could also give a greater period of time if we wanted to look at the week of the 17th of February instead. However, if you guys wanted to wait that long, my other concern is that you might have some of your applicants receiving offers from other school districts, because of course February 1st is the deadline for non-renewal of superintendents on their second or subsequent contract, which means that the month of February can get pretty hectic with other boards making offers.
Can you just run us through the structure of the evening? Who's attending, who's invited? You said it's pretty open, but obviously we want to have some stakeholders from the community involved also.
Yeah, and we can tune that up to the board's preference. The bare minimum is that it'll occur during a public meeting, such as we're in right now. The interviews are generally well attended, because you're going to have people from your community who are interested in the selection of your next leader. In terms of interfacing with news media, for example, we have done press releases if that's something the board is interested in. I don't know if you generally have someone from the paper present for your board meetings, but if you want, we can certainly release that information in the form of a press release to get more people in the room. I think that would be great if you wanted to do that.
You haven't had press yet.
That's a good sign.
And what about actual questions? Are those only coming from the board, or can we ask, some of our stakeholders in the community for feedback, or allow them to present questions? Just what's your recommendation there?
So the interview questions, after we get done tonight, I'll be sending the board a bank of interview questions that we've questions in that bank of questions for you guys to go through and ask every single one. You'd be spending 2 or 3 hours per interview if you did that. So what I ask you to do is to respond to me individually with the number of the question you like. For example, the chair could say that she prefers questions 1 through 5, 7 through 20, for example, and then we would collect all those responses, put together a list of interview questions for the Board of Trustees, and distribute that to you under the attorney-client privilege, so none of the applicants would have the ability to learn the questions beforehand. In terms of who asks the questions, it's the Board of Trustees, the trustees who does the hiring and firing. So in terms of the interview, you will be asking the questions. If there is some sort of post-informal event, like a mixer or some sort of facility tour with other stakeholders, you might have someone other than a trustee ask one of the candidates a question. They aren't really required to answer those. Likewise, you might have someone attempt to ask one of the finalists a question during public comment, but it's called public comment period for a reason, not public question period.
Just so I have clarity, hi, I'm Bill. Sorry to butt into this. You were talking about that last segment was very specific towards the public asking questions, not the board. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So the board would typically sit down with your list of questions that you had provided to me beforehand and just go around robin. Start at one end of the table, you each take a question and ask it, and the finalists give their answer. And the reason for that is so that we can substantiate later on down the road that each of the finalists had an identical opportunity to make their case to the Board of Trustees, that no one had a superior or inferior ability to do that. We want to make this process as uniform as possible in light of the fact that boards of trustees do sometimes experience legal challenges with regard to superintendent searches.
Sure. I just was curious if one of us had what might be perceived as a tough question is, if there's somebody there filtering through the tough questions, now you can't do that, you can't do this. Because there might be some tough questions. I don't have any in mind.
Most of the questions in our bank of interview questions are tough questions. We have questions that ask the finalists to reflect on their weaknesses, on their areas for growth, areas that typically appear in those more insightful questions that are designed to elicit answers that actually tell you something.
Yeah. Good. Thank you.
So, do we want to offer virtual and in-person interviews? What do you guys think?
I've been a part of both over the last 3 or 4 years with the changes that we've went through, and I've had success with both. So I don't have like a strong opinion either way. I do prefer in person, but that's not always, we're not always able with our location.
What kind of cost do you typically see for that type of travel? Is it a couple thousand a person, 1,000 a person that you typically see for caps for travel?
That would be high. This season, so far, the highest travel reimbursement I've seen is a $500 cap. Many boards of trustees also choose to provide no travel reimbursement because they view it as the finalists putting a little bit of skin in the game. So it depends on your preference. As I said before, the only recommendation we have is if you set a number, set it as a cap. You don't want to be getting, first class airfare receipts from these individuals or, expensive hotel bills. Set yourself up for success in that regard.
And I think we got one's in the valley, two's in the state, granted on the east side, and one's out of state. I guess.
I feel fine with both.
I feel fine with both, but do we want to give them the
I
option?
like the personal, and I like what you just said about having a little bit of skin in the game. When I look back over my life, I had to show up in person. And with 80% of communication being nonverbal, I just think you can maybe pick up on subtleties. But it does seem the last few years that become quite accustomed to Zoom or what have you. That wouldn't be the end of the world. Or maybe for the one that's out of state, we could do Zoom.
And that's an option as well. What many boards have opted for is that I expressed to the finalists that in-person interviews are preferred, but that virtual interviews are allowed as a contingency if they have an unavoidable conflict, for example.
Well, at this time of year too, I suppose, who knows what the weather will be, so you gotta almost keep their safety in mind.
That'd be my thought. And I guess, I think budget-wise, we have around be willing to reimburse for some travel. I know it's just from gas, and especially flights for the one out of state. I just would, I'd hate for a good candidate not come because they didn't reimburse or something. So that's, whether that's skin in the game or not, I don't know.
It's hard for me to put value on getting the very best candidate for our kids. I can't.
I can give the board some insight with regard to candidate Ator. Alex has interviewed he's interviewed for one other position that I know of at this time, and he will be interviewing for a position tomorrow in another school district. He has decided to attend both of those interviews in person, so I think you can probably expect that if he's still interviewing, and if he does not withdraw as a result of an offer from another district. But I believe the first district he interviewed with did not offer him the position. They ended up going with a more local hire.
Do you guys have any thoughts on anything out there?
I think the option is not terrible.
I needed to do a virtual interview and interview from Washington. I mean, I got hired. Hopefully everything's okay. I mean, that's kind of, it's a little awkward to say so, you know, but it is, I think that sometimes, I mean, even though virtual feels like all of the nonverbal and stuff, communications, while I agree with that, I think sometimes what you say is kind of zoned in and focused, and I think people can focus on that piece, and it's really about kind of what that person knows and, you know, what they can say and what they can actually articulate within that framework. So I don't have an issue with it at all.
I like the verbiage of preferred and allowed.
I like that. And then, do we want to offer reimbursement up to a certain dollar amount?
I think so. They don't get paid enough to begin with, so as far as I'm concerned. So, give them something.
Want to do up to 500 a person? You figure hotel room, gas, or flight. The one with the flight's obviously going to be over 500, so they have to cover some themselves.
I'm okay with
That
that.
sounds very reasonable.
So, Andrew, just to clarify, that we really like your virtual is, or in-person preferred, virtual is an option wording. And also we will reimburse up to $500.
Up to $500 supported by receipts. Madam Chair, that sounds good to me. I think the only thing left is for the board to put that exact list to a vote along with the options. So a vote to offer candidates Ator, Carmen-Zoni, McIntyre, and Peterson interviews with in-person interviews preferred, virtual as a contingency, and up to $500 in travel reimbursement supported by receipts.
I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept that. Wording. Yes.
I second that.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any further discussion?
you just got those 4 names from tallies
Yes.
from all of us?
From all of us,
Okay,
yeah.
just to clarify. So,
Any public opinion, comments?
sounds good.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, Andrew, is there anything else that you need from us?
That's it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the trustees and to Joe. I really appreciate it. I'll get started on the reference checks for these individuals immediately, and I'll send you that bank of interview questions so you can read it. In terms of dates to offer the candidates, I think the last thing we talked about was February 17th, the week of the 17th. Midweek that week would be better for me, the 18th or the 19th. Does the board have a sense of whether either of those 2 days would work for them?
Okay, let me clarify about the date. The week of February 10th. Is that okay for everyone?
The 10th works for me too. I mean, that's either way.
I
Yep.
think we were thinking February 10th, the week of February 10th.
The 10th could work for me as well. How about the 11th or the 12th? Is it a
Okay.
preference?
Bill?
11th
I
and
can't
12th?
make it.
11th and 12th?
Yeah,
Okay,
that would be okay.
okay. All right, so the 11th
So
and 12th.
shall I tell the finalists the 12th, or should we just, I mean, we can always finalize the date later, but I do like to contact the finalists as soon as possible and let them know. Obviously, we won't have time yet, but are we comfortable saying the 12th, for example?
The 12th, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
12th.
I'll do that as well. I'll reach out to the finalists as soon as we get off this meeting. If any of you have questions in the meantime, just reach out, email or phone. Thanks again.
All right, well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
your
Thanks,
time.
Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
Much better.
Scott's not here. I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Somebody's gonna have to take Scott's place.